Ghana's public debt stock could see a significant decline of about 10% due to the rapid appreciation of the cedi, according to fresh estimates by JoyNews Research. Since the beginning of 2025, the Ghana cedi has surged in value, gaining approximately 21.5% against the US dollar, making it the fastest appreciation currency globally since April 2025, according to Bloomberg. Now, analyst by JoyNews Research shows this rally is poised to ease the country's external debt burden, resulting in a 10% reduction in the current 726.7 billion debt burden. Well, we'll bring you a little report we put together, but in studio now is our favorite person, Isaac Kofi, who brings it all to the simplicity for you and I, so you know what to do with your cedi or your dollar. Kofi, well, you give us an overview first of all, but by the time we'll be done with this, we'll know what it really means to have the public debt stock, what that is.
Yeah.
People should understand it, and what the overall of this conversation would have on Ghana's GDP. Let's start.
Well, I think we should start from where the cedi has actually fared since the beginning of the year. And if you look at the real value in terms of real appreciation against the greenback of the US, we can talk about some 17.6% in terms of appreciation. This is the highest any government has done in a span of 4 months or in a span of, let's say, 3 months. So this is the highest we've seen.
The current one is 17.6.
17.6.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. 17.6 is the highest since we did redenomination in terms of the first terms or the first years of every government. And what is this doing? This has actually been the trend so far, how the cedi has actually traveled since the beginning of the year. You can see the 1st of January, this is 2024. We were doing somewhere around $1 is to 11 cedis, 80 pesos. That was last year, January. But when we began this year, just look at it where we were at the beginning of the year after the election. We were around $1 is to 14 cedis, 70 pesos. And I'm sure by now where your eyes are currently looking at is a sharp decline. You are seeing here how far the dollar has fallen against the cedi. And that's what we are seeing. Sharp from close to 15 cedis, 50 pesos. Now we are talking about 12 cedis, 10 pesos. And this morning we understand that the Bank of Ghana in their interbank data that they just put out, quoting 12 cedis, 12.09 cedis. And this also has been actually affirmed by Bloomberg, who also quoting 12 cedis, 10 pesos. And we are currently monitoring what is going on. But this is not something that's happening in isolation. It's as a result of several factors, and it's having impact on one thing that has been the bane on the Ghanaian economy, which is the debt situation of the country. And remember that we went to the IMF program. We could not get a fresh program. We had to do debt restructuring because our debt levels were not sustainable. And according to the IMF, we're doing more than 90%. World Bank was quoting 102% of our GDP. But the picture is changing now because of how the cedi has rallied against the dollar. Now, so we start looking at the debt stock.
Right.
This has been how much the country has been owing. We started tracking this from January of 2024 to December. This is the latest updates we have from the Bank of Ghana. Of course, the president has been updated, but we take the data from the institution responsible for quoting some of these things. The Bank of Ghana says, as of the end of 2024, the debt situation of the country was close to 730 billion Ghana cedis. This is the situation of the country. And if you look at it, when the cedi started gaining value, what you could see, and when we started the IMF program, started getting some inflows, you could see the cedi or the dollar, how do you call it, the debt burden of the country actually coming down.
Why?
Because there is an external component of the debt stock.
Which is usually pegged in dollar.
Absolutely. So this line will tell you that story. So this is the country's debt stock in dollars. What you can see is that when you quote it in dollars, it's actually very uniform and stable. But when you begin to do the math and estimation in cedis, what you see is fluctuation, especially in moments where the health of the cedi is either good or bad. So the external component, which currently is around $28.3 billion, is what's actually influencing this. And when we're doing the estimation, that was the component that we were looking at, which is currently more than a billion, 100 billion Ghana cedis. And we are saying that if the cedi is currently around 12 cedis, 10 pesos, then that could drop the country's debt stock by some 10%. And if you do the nominal calculation, we are looking at some 74.6 billion Ghana cedis. So roughly 75 billion Ghana cedis being the savings we've done as a result of the Cedi appreciation. Now, this takes me back to 2022 November, when the former Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta was reading the 2023 budget. He said we had lost, or we had added, a weight of 93 billion Ghana cedis to our debt stock. Why? Because of depreciation in 2022. So this year, the story is different. The narrative has changed. Why? Because it's a story of appreciation, and that's doing some sort of good to the health, not just the cedi, but also the current debt stock of the country.
Interesting. So, first of all, I know you speak a lot of data. This gentleman speaks too much data, so we're not confused. First, tell us, what is the public debt? What does that mean for what, as a country, this is what we owe? Why? What do we owe? I
mean, we fund most of our projects with debt, right? So remember the Eurobond story and how we get money to fund our budget. The truth is that usually when we do our budget, our expenditure is more than our revenue. So what we do is that the difference or the deficit, we fund it with debt. Where it's either we borrow from the domestic space or from the external space. And that's what we call the country's debt, or how much we are owing as a country. And sometimes if you have to do the recalculation, sometimes we even add debts from Cocoa Board and what have you. But in terms of the total debt burden as a country, if we were to be an individual, how much are we owing? Is that near 730 billion Ghana cedis that we are talking about? And we pay some of this debt, it fluctuates as some of the economic indicators changes. And so if you want to understand the debt stock, it's how much Ghana owes. In simple terms.
So you would say that if the dollar remains at a little over 12 cedi today, we shall be reducing that stock, this debt that you're just teaching us, by 10%, which amounts to 74, a little over 74 billion.
So let's say slightly 75 billion cedis.
Okay. Now let's go to why we're not practicing some sorcery or occultism here, right? why has the cedi really appreciated strongly in the early months of 2020?
Well, the argument has been that, look, the US dollar is falling on the global market, but if you don't get your fundamentals right in the domestic space, the US dollar could be falling, but you could be falling too as well. So what has happened is that when we come to the domestic factors currently pushing the cedi, of course, the US dollar falling on the global market has been the enabling environment for all of this to continue, and we see the magnitude of appreciation. I have always said that the true value of the dollar to the cedi is around 9 cedis, 50 pesos, right? And so and other people quote higher figures. But what we saw in 2022 was that artificial depreciation of the cedi, because we were using our reserve to shore up the dollar and all of that. Then we saw artificial appreciation, but this time around, something different is happening in the domestic space, where a commodity like cocoa, which has been the backbone of the Ghanaian economy, we weren't getting so much inflows from cocoa because, one, we're doing forward sales, two, so much smuggling, and three, the fact that, we're in galamsey activities, right? But this year, the story is different. In the first 2 months of 2024, we've been able to get more than $800 million from cocoa exports. Has never happened before. People speak about gold export. Of course, I have my own analysis on that, where I always say that if you are saying gold export going up, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything comes in the country. There's a portion that's surrendered to the Bank of Ghana. And in fact, the more the export goes up, the more Bank of Ghana's amount also goes up, so they get more to support the cedi. Okay. So in simple terms, it's a demand and supply situation where Bank of Ghana has more dollars now to actually fund the current demand that we are having. Why? Because there's another factor, remittances, where currently is one of the highest in terms of exchange rate or let's say forex earners for the country. Last year, we got about $6.6 billion from remittances. And the problem was that there were loopholes where certain structures weren't allowing those forex to come into the country. But the intelligence we are getting is that this current governor has been heavy on that, trying to close the loophole. So now you have the money, coming into the Bank of Ghana's account directly, which means more dollars for the Bank of Ghana to actually give out to people. So demand and supply situation. And when we go on the fiscal side, we understand that the government is no longer spending as high as they used to be, or not borrowing as high as they used to. Now, if you look at the 91-day Treasury bill, what you see is that the rate has even come down below 17%, which means government is getting money to fund other things, but the cost of that capital has been low. All of this affecting the good health of the city we are seeing currently.
You have just said demand and supply, and quickly my mind just went to equilibrium.
Yeah,
really, like at that
absolutely,
point.
yeah.
And so this will mean that will it have, or I should be inquiring from you, that will it have any impact after all on the total GDP of this country?
Absolutely, it does will have an impact. Now the question is, if government is not spending, then it's going to have an impact on your GDP, because the big G is important in that calculation, right? Also, if people are not, if liquidity is actually constrained in the economy and people are not spending because they are not liquidity in the system, that's going to affect the GDP of the country. So people are estimating that because of the current appreciation we are seeing in the city, it could slow the rate of growth in the country, because one, the government is trying to be very cautious, not spending. Bank of Ghana is also tightening up somewhere, which means that liquidity is not available for people to spend. And that's how we calculate GDP, spending, right? So all of these things will not happen. So that could slow the pace at which you grow. And already we've seen estimates from Fitch, from World Bank and all of those, quoting some around somewhere 4%, 3%, 3.5%. But we understand and we know that there were years where there were low projections, but the Ghanaian economy actually did miracles and, grew more than expected.
So, Kofi, if our current strategies, which we can see obviously, cocoa, gold board,
you speak of gold board.
I mean, yeah, maybe, you never know. And if we maintain it and yet the external factors hit, how much can it hit the country? If the external factors hit so much that the dollar may have to still go up a bit, will it really still hit us so much?
Well, let's go back to Baumia, who said that if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. So if government is able to get the fundamentals right, no matter how strong the external factors may be, it may have an impact, but the magnitude of the impact will not be that, high as compared to what we experienced in 2022. If you're still able to close the loopholes in the remittance space and you're getting more inflows from remittances, although Donald Trump wants to tax what is coming from the US, if you are still able to put in place gold board and now you're getting more from your gold exports, if you put something in place and people are no more importing, in terms of food imports and all of that, something can happen to the US market or on a global scale, but the magnitude could be low. And we are projecting that if the current, pace at which the city is rallying against the dollar should continue, we will be achieving the IMF target of debt to GDP ratio of somewhere around 56%, because currently the city is in a very good position for us to reach that target. And we may even reach that target before the IMF program ends next year. That's our projection.
Because you have introduced the IMF, it just begs my mind, has it not, this IMF program entirely, it's not contributed to this Cedi Appreciation?
It has. Because what that does is that it gives investors confidence, right? There's something that people keep forgetting, that no country spends their international reserve unless you're in a difficult position, right? So if your international reserves are actually increasing, there's a new government in town, what happens is that there's confidence. People are bringing their forex from other places to come and trade in the country. Supply of dollars or supply of forex becomes available. So what is happening is that the IMF program has been that bedrock to build the confidence, because we were at a point where our reserves could not even afford us 1 month of import cover. It was the same IMF that gave us balance of payment support until we got here. So it will be disingenuous for anybody to say that, look, the IMF program hasn't done anything, but solely because of the fact that we have a new government. The IMF has been the headmaster of this kind of goodwill we are seeing in the economy. And we are praying that maybe revisions that maybe the government wants to do will not affect the current state of the IMF program. But many have said that, look, allow the IMF program to end in peace and enjoy the bounties that comes with. But our projection is that we could reach the debt to GDP ratio in the IMF program even before the program ends.
Quickly, before you go, should I keep my dollar or not?
It's national television. I actually don't want to. Maybe we can discuss that.
But what about the person watching now? What shall I do? Shall I buy dollar? Shall I hold my dollar? What should I do?
But I mean, it's value. Yeah, I mean, it's value. You are looking for value for your money. If you buy dollars right now, it goes to 11 cedis, you've lost. But there are other alternatives. The Bank of Ghana is providing the gold coin, which you've seen the data is performing well. So maybe you can look at the gold coin.
I just got Kofi to give you some free consultation. Kofi, thank you. Always a pleasure doing this with you. But